Welcome, everyone. This is Gayla Kesey, Education Manager here at the Augusta Museum of History. Thank you so much for joining us for our final brown bag presentation for 2021. We have another wonderful program for you today. But before we get started, I wanted to tell you about the upcoming events we have scheduled at the museum. Our Mondays at the museum for preschool-age children always highlights an exhibit in the museum, followed by a story and a craft. This month, we are honoring the indigenous peoples that lived in Georgia and the central Savannah River area. Because of COVID, we are only presenting via Facebook and YouTube at this time. The Augusta Museum of History is proud to present an experience to delight the senses, our annual holiday gingerbread village. From November 18 through the 28th, with the exception of Thanksgiving Day, the display and the opportunity to bid on the historic themed gingerbread creations are free to the public during regular museum hours. Visit the Augusta Museum of History through December 30th. To search for the museum's elf on a shelf, Ginger, the elf, throughout the museum. Each week in December, Ginger will be hiding in a different place and watching to see who is naughty and who is nice. On December 4th, we will have a special treat when Mrs. Claus joins us on our trolley for a special storytime event at 11:30 and 12:30. Afterwards, participants are invited to see if they can spot where Ginger is hiding in the exhibits and earn a holiday treat. Finally, children can relive the magic of the classic story on a magical trip aboard the museum's very own passenger car. Passengers will be entertained by a reading of Chris Van Allsburg's classic, The Polar Express. Hot chocolate, cookies, and Santa will be waiting at the end of the journey for all those who believe. All aboard the Polar Express! Tickets are on sale now and selling fast. The 1 o'clock slots for both days are filled. Come by or call the museum to reserve your golden tickets today. Now I would like to turn it over to our very own museum registrar, Natalie Smith, for her presentation today.
And this is our very last session for 2021. And so she gets to bring up the rear, so to speak, and provide wonderful information with us today. So I am going to turn it over to Natalie and let her share what is in our collection.
Right. Hi, I'm Natalie Smith, and I'm going to be sharing my screen with you today. See if I can get it working properly. So yeah, like Gayla said, I am the registrar here at the Augusta Museum of History. I have been here since 2019, and it is my pleasure today to talk to you about the women of Augusta and how we have them in our collections here at the museum. Just briefly, some info about the museum in case you're not aware. Been here in Augusta since 1937, and in case you are interested in visiting us, I included our hours. You can come Thursday through Sunday. Also, I'm sure Gayla will let you know about this as well, but starting January of 2022, the next Brown Bag series is going to be on the era of change, 1950 to 1980. Just to kind of give you an idea of what I'll be talking about today, I am going to loosely follow the different lectures that were given throughout this past year on the women in Augusta. And if you haven't listened to Dr. Leanne Caldwell's lecture in January, then I highly suggest going back to that one. She gave me a lot of references to research while pulling together my presentation. First, we're going to talk about the Native American women. So even before Augusta, it was a thriving Native American trading site. And when Oglethorpe arrived in 1736, the area's mostly Muskogee Creek people. Other tribes present in those days were the Chickasaw, the Yuchi, and the Shawnee. And then before, in the 17th century, the Wet'suwet'en people controlled a large portion of the Augusta region. So we have some pottery sherds that are actually on view in our gallery in Augusta Story. But these are from the Woodland period, so that was between about 500 BC and 1180. And the beginning of the woodland culture is marked by the widespread use of pottery, also a period of increasing agriculture, sophistication, and population growth in many regions. You can see here different types of pottery that is found in the archaeology of this region. We have stamped, incised, plain pottery. So we have lots of different options here to look at. So Native American women were in charge of child rearing and food cultivation, collection, preparation. Different options here to look at. So Native American women were in charge of child rearing and food cultivation, collection, preparation, and preservation. They created textiles, baskets, pottery, and household items. This includes processing animal hides that were used for clothing, bedding, or even trading. Like I said, Augusta was a major trading area, even before European settlement here. Here are some other different pieces that are in our collections. We have this really great piece of pottery here on the left, incised pottery. You can see the little, it's like someone used maybe either another small piece of pottery or even a stick to kind of make this incised pattern around the whole piece. And then a carved soapstone bowl, which would for maybe something to do with milling. Got lots of corn in this region. So again, these were for food preparation. Another fact that I forgot to mention is really neat women history in this region. The Muskogee Creek Society is actually matrilineal. So we'll move on to Princess Augusta. There's going to be some words on a slide that I probably won't pronounce correctly, and I'm sorry in advance. Princess Augusta of Saxe-Gotha, born in Gotha in 1719. In 1736, at the age of 17, she married Frederick, the Prince of Wales, and heir to the throne of England. And when Oglethorpe came to this area and established the city of Augusta, it was the same year that Princess Augusta married into the royal family. So in honor of the new princess, he named the city after her. And while Princess Augusta never made the trip to the city named after her, she did go on to give birth to 9 children. The oldest son became King George III, who of course led the British against the colonies in the American Revolution. So there is a bit of a legacy of Princess Augusta. There were 2 battles in the American Revolution fought in this CSRA region. Kind of moving on to some of these themes of women's history here in domestic. It was found that women didn't have very many rights or opportunities outside of the home. Often wealthy women were confined to learning just the domestic arts or ornamentals, such as reading, sewing, and music. Embroidery was a common pastime, often done in company of other women or during a woman's downtime. This piece here is a bookmark from about 1860. And as you can see, it has love embroidered around it. The next object from our collection I share with you is this quilt. It was sewn in 1861, but I actually think it's 1862, but by Anne Winters, who was a recent widow at the age of 35 with 5 young children. She basically cut up and pieced together pieces of her Paris-made wedding trousseau to create the tumbling bottle pattern. Each square is made up of either silk, satin, or velvet. The backing of the dress is really vibrant red satin. That was actually the last dress that her husband George bought for her before he died. And we actually had this quilt on exhibit beginning of 2021 in part of our quilt series. As you can see here, we have a photo in the collection of Anne. Just a few years after she would have made the quilt, she continued to wear black for the rest of her life, part of her mourning for her husband. And there she is around 1900. Another domestic art that women were taught was music. This piano was made here in Augusta by Peter Brenner in 1875. It was donated to the museum by Brenner's granddaughter in 1966. So piano was a very common instrument that polite women would have learned, maybe the harp, also singing. Piano used to be on exhibit, the picture on the left, but now actually it's currently in our collection storage. You can see a little bit of behind the scenes here in that photo. I do want to acknowledge, though, that not all women had the ability to pursue domestic arts. It was limited to the wealthy white women. African American women did not have the freedom to do so. And as Dr. Caldwell explained back in January, that most African American women actually in Augusta were domestic slaves. In the outlying areas, though, the CSRA, a lot of them worked in the fields. I do have a photo here of Julia Michael. She was born into slavery. I believe this picture was taken after the Civil War, but I don't have an exact date on it. But she was a domestic slave, and she actually continued in the domestic service after the Civil War as a mammy, so as a caretaker for white children. Dr. Caldwell also mentioned a pretty vibrant free Black community in Augusta. Unfortunately, we actually don't have anything in collection that is from that period. She specifically mentioned the Dent family. The museum does have some items from the Dent funeral home, which would go on to be founded later by that family. It's even a carriage that we have on display in the first floor gallery. And that funeral home was there from 1900 on, but it actually burned down last year. And then another part of domestic life I want to talk about is how women were, advertised to. So a commonality for all classes of women is that they've long been the leader in making household purchases, causing brands to advertise directly to women for the last several centuries. These advertisements in particular are from Dunbar and Company shoes, and it shows women on a Tuesday versus women on a Wednesday. And I have tried to break down what this advertisement is actually trying to convey. I can't quite say, except for this, maybe the same shoes that work while you're doing laundry on a Tuesday are also good for doing sewing on a Wednesday. But it definitely is appealing to a women's kind of household chores and needing quality shoes for that. The next theme I want to talk about is education in the past. In the 19th century, women would likely learn the basics and eventually going on to a finishing school or academy if they had money. By the end of the 1800s, women had some access to high schools and more advanced education, but again, if they were wealthy enough and weren't needed in fields or in factories or somewhere making money for the family. But I have pulled a selection of photographs in the museum's collection to show you today. First, we have an unidentified primary school, so you can see all these children here looking very pleased to be there. But again, we don't know exactly which school this is, but a good group of kids. Next, we have this image from 1906 of the Sacred Heart Academy. Sisters of Mercy opened Sacred Heart Academy in 1876 at the 1200 block of Ellis Street, downtown Augusta. I did find an article in 1900, the Augusta Chronicle, which noted that the school year in 1900 began Sacred Heart Academy with 212 students, and the rate of tuition was $1.50 per month for the school services. It also showed that the school was first intended actually as an all-girls school, but later became co-ed. But this picture is really great. On the left there, you notice the nun would have been their teacher. And the next school I want to talk about is Tubman High School, which was founded in 1874, originally as Neely's Institute, and later renamed in honor of Emily Tubman, an Augusta philanthropist. It was first built on Reynolds Street in downtown. Tubman was the only public high school for girls in the Augusta area, actually till the 1950s, all-girls school. At the fire of, do you also want to show, fast forward, go on my next slide, you have the photo again on Reynolds Street there on the left. And then on the right, we have the graduating class of 1888. And this is a really great piece because it has baby's name in this photograph. But sadly, the building did burn down in the fire of 1916. The picture is labeled on the back, the last roll call. You have all the students out front of it. However, shortly thereafter, in 1917, the new Tubman opened on Walton Way. The new structure was actually the result of Augusta's first public bond referendum in support of education. But according to the National Park Service's website, this new Tubman school was considered one of the most modern schools in the South. It was built with everything they could need or want on the premises. Again, you have a picture here of some students at Tubman alongside their teacher, and they're wearing those uniforms, even the same uniforms that they wore, in the previous picture. You look out, you can see them wearing the same thing. A bit more about Emily Tubman. She was born Emily Harvey Thomas in 1794. She would go on to marry Richard Tubman, who was a wealthy Augusta planter when she was 24. He was 28 years older than her. So he actually passed away relatively shortly into their marriage in 1836. But he left Emily behind a large fortune she then used to become one of the most well-known philanthropists in the area. She would pass away in 1885 at the age of 91. In our collection, we have some items that actually belong to Emily Tubman, including some, you might not know what they are, but those are pockets. So you would have basically put the pockets on under your dress, so that way you'd have access to, things tucked away in your pockets. And so that would have been put beneath your outer dress there, as well as its parasol handle, which would have been attached to probably an ornately beautiful silk parasol. However, the silk did not make it to 2021. And again, there's a photograph of Emily Tubman there on the left. The next lady I want to talk about is Lucy Craft Laney, probably the most well-known educator in Augusta. She was born in 1853 and graduated from Atlanta University in 1873. The next 10 years, she worked as a teacher in several different cities around Georgia. But then she came back to Augusta to start the city's first school for African-American children. It was actually originally in the basement of Christ Presbyterian Church. But then in 1886, just 2 years after she began the school, it received an official state charter as the Haynes Normal and Industrial Institute. She also went on, though, to found the local branch of the NAACP in 1918. But there's a photo of her on the left. She was a bit younger, and on the right is a really well-known image of her. And then this ring in the center has H&I for Haynes Normal Institute, and it actually belonged or was made for Lucy Craft Laney. Her name is actually etched into the institute. On the left from 1929, she's full of students. She's a little nervous. There's even some guys hanging off the porch on the far left. And on the right, we have female students at Haynes, circa 1940s. But in 1949, A.R. Johnson Haynes Institute were actually merged into the Lucy Craft Laney Comprehensive High School. The old Haynes building was torn down and the new high school built on the same site. So here we have it there on the left in 1953. But the school was segregated, and it was for the African American children. It was built to, this record recorded, to be about $750,000. And was thought to have been one of the most modern school buildings in Richmond County. The note that was with this picture, I do have to wonder, though, how true that was, considering this was a segregated school system. So students were still at the disadvantage of receiving less tax dollars in the all-white schools. We do also have the early 1960s there. I just love the hairdos in the 1960s. My hair could never do that. There's a little bit more information about Lucy Craft Laney. There is a museum in the Laney Walker district at 1116 Phillips Street. And this last image here from the education portion, and again, I'm sorry for pronunciation, is Lucy Pelletier. She was a graduate of Sacred Heart Academy. This photo is sometime between 1880 and 1890. She's wearing her traditional all-white dress. The post photograph proudly displaying her diploma. I just love that photograph. Next theme I want to get into is women in the workforce. So one major role women could fill in the workforce was as a nurse. It became an acceptable professional career after the Civil War, which was the first time women were relied upon to take care of soldiers. We have the city hospital photograph, opened two nursing schools in the 90s. You had the Barrett School of Nursing was for the white students and the Lamar School of Nursing for the black students. In this photo, you can see the Barrett School is on the right and the Lamar School is on the left wing with the main city hospital entrance in the center. And going back to Lucy Craft Laney, she helped establish the nursing program that was known as Lamar Hospital Training School. And Lamar School graduates first class of nurses in 1896. Lamar and Barrett would go on to integrate in 1965, forming the Unified University Hospital of Nursing. And I have here some images of Barrett, who, graduating class in 1950, as well as classroom from that same year. It's got that wonderful skull and crossbones right on there with the UH for University Hospital. We also have this very proud lady here. I don't have the year on that photograph, but I would hazard to guess we're getting closer to that 1960s, 1950s in this photograph. Next, I want to talk about women in the military. Since about the First World War, women have been actively part of the military, most commonly as nurses. Pulled here an image of Florence McDaniel, of the U.S. Navy in her World War II uniform. She was a roommate of fellow nurse Mary Lou May, who was a longtime nurse here in Augusta. And we do have a good-sized collection of Mary Lou May's nursing memorabilia and her time with the Red Cross as well in our collections. I think that's so much from the PowerPoint. And then on the right is a uniform that was issued to Ruth Jones during World War II, who also served as a nurse for the Army. And then a bit more recent history, we have Augusta's own Susan Still-Kilrain. She was born in 1961, earned a bachelor's in aeronautical engineering and a master's in aerospace engineering, designated a naval aviator in 1987. She worked as an instructor and test pilot for the Johnson Space Center in 1995 as an astronaut candidate. Susan is a veteran of 2 space flights, logging just about 472 hours in space. She retired from the Navy in 2005, and this uniform of hers is on exhibit in our local Legends Gallery right now. She's an incredibly impressive woman. The more I read about it, the more I was impressed. And then another career that women, especially now, but starting about the Civil War time period on, are known having is teachers. So previously a male-dominated field until about the Civil War, women quickly took over mostly primary education and female education. But the all-male high schools and colleges will be taught by men. But here we have an unidentified school and class, but with their teacher in the back. Factories. The museum has great documentation of Augusta area factories, especially the mills, from about 1940s onwards, from our Wilkinson and Fitzsim Studios collection. So the one on the left there is the Wilkinson studio photograph, taken in 1949 there. These women working on machines. And then on the right is a photograph from our Fitzsim's collection. Both of those 2 studios were very active in Augusta, had contracts with the Augusta Chronicle, but would be hired by particular mills in this instance to take photographs. So, good picture too, one of my favorites. So this is a photo from the earlier days in the mills, and you can see in the foreground I can just make out some people and a goat. The goat's right there at the front of the picture. Maybe people would just finish up a day's work at Sibley Mills. You can see the background there, and maybe on their way home to Harrisburg. But it's a fun picture of some of those really early days, 1890. In fact, the textile industry here in Augusta was modeled off of Lowell, Massachusetts, which famously employed legions of women in their factories. And also factories, of course, employed young children, since there were no real labor laws yet at that time period. Next is the Mary Warren Home, established in 1903, created to care for the women and children as well, but women who could no longer work in the factories anymore. As the need grew, the organization moved to this home here at 2109 Central Avenue in the Somerville District. And that opened that building in 1915. And it continued to operate as a home for widowed and indigent women until in 1994, and it became a personal care home. But we have postcards showing the home, as well as a rocking chair in our collection that was actually used there at the Mary Warren Home. Going to keep moving. I've got so much good stuff to talk about. Women in the arts, Mary Warren Home. Women in the arts. We have first here a postcard of the Gertrude Herbert Institute of Art. And so in 1937, Olivia Herbert, a winter resident of Augusta, purchased this home. It was originally built in 1818, a federal-style building on Telfair. Herbert would then donate the residence to the Augusta Art Club to provide a permanent home. Previously, the art club had been meeting in individuals' houses. So this gave them a place to come to permanently. Today, the Institute has classroom space and galleries for students and faculty exhibits. We also have a great website if you're interested in learning more about the Institute as well. The next woman I want to talk about is Jessie Norman. So in this photograph, she's on the far left. The man in the center there is Jerry Harris, and on the right is Rose Harris, his sister, full name Rose Harris Sanders. Sorry about that last name. C-R-Q-U-E. But Jessie Norman was born in 1945 and actually recently passed away in 2005 in 2019. She had an amazing career as an opera singer on the world stage. Jessie attended Howard University on full scholarship with the help of Rose, actually. She gained numerous awards during her singing career, including 5 Grammys and the National Medal of Arts. But Jessie grew up singing in her church, the Mount Calvary Baptist Church. And she is an alumna of Laney Walker High School. And in 2003, Jessie Norman teamed up with Rachel Longstreet Foundation to open the Jessie Norman School of Arts, which is a tuition-free after-school program for the performing arts in downtown Augusta. On the left here, we have this framed photo and ticket. It's showing Jessie actually in one of her costumes during an opera, and along with the ticket for that event. Then on the right is a record of Jessie Norman. We have a pretty large collection of her record albums. This one is Erwin Gage on piano. And another lady in the arts is Emily Remington. She founded the Augusta Choral Society, and she taught at Payne and Augusta College as well. But this photo is of Emily Remington and Jim Cullum of Cullum's Department Store, and they are holding the score of Handel's Messiah, the Augusta Choral Society annual Messiah performance, and it was presented by Cullum's Department Store and held at the Bell Auditorium, free for the public to attend. So this photo was taken actually as publicity for the event, and again, that's a big Simpson graph right there. And then my last kind of theme I want to discuss are clubs and philanthropic societies. So the first one is controversial, the Ladies Memorial Association. Yes, very closely related to the current controversy. The Ladies Memorial Association was formed in Augusta very shortly after the Civil War to honor the Confederate dead. But this stereo view was taken Memorial, which is located in Broad Street, downtown. But these cards are printed off and sold to benefit the Memorial Fund to support the cost of the statue. And it is interesting to note that the Augusta Monument went up very soon after the war in 1875, versus a lot of city statues that came up a couple of decades later with that lost cause generation. But this is a really cool photo. You see a stage erected, smaller carriages, the hackneys with their umbrellas so they don't get a tan or sunburned, and you see the monument being put in place, at least the cornerstone for the monument. Next, though, we have the Augusta Women's Club, which was founded in 1913. It is the oldest women's civic organization in Augusta. So on the left, we have a framed list of the charter members of the club. And then on the right is architectural drawings of the clubhouse. And then we also have a good number of their scrapbooks. This one is from 1928 to 1931, and it's a bit fragile, so I didn't take any photos of the inside, but it includes pages and pages of newspaper clippings of any reported activities of the club. The Augusta Women's Club is still active. Its website states that its unifying focus is intellectual and moral development, common interest in volunteer service. Also, garden clubs have long been a part of Augusta's history, and we are the Garden City here in Augusta. This slide, I have found some photos from the Georgia Railroad and Bank Flower Show, which was held in February of 1961, as an event for the Magnolia Garden Club. And the photo on the far left, you can see women set up at a banquet table, a buffet table with tea sets. In the middle, you have women just talking to each other, and I do love that lady second from the right. Her hat is made up of flowers. And then the photograph on the right side is giving a lecture, probably talking about how to make a certain arrangement. Garden clubs are both social and educational clubs, so that's part of their mission as well. And we do have some scrapbooks in different garden clubs in the collection. This one is from the Iris Garden Club, a scrapbook from 1948 to 1982, which recounts the club's history. In that time period to 1982, which recounts the club's history. In that time period, there's ribbons, photographs, letters, and other memorabilia inside the scrapbook. The photo there on the right is from inside that book, and it shows the charter members of the Iris Garden Club alongside included, but a full list of ladies in that photograph. The Augusta Museum of History also has scrapbooks from the Forest Hills Garden Club, as well as the Iris Garden Club scrapbook as well. And then we have the West End Library, which was founded by women in the Augusta area. Basically, the West End of Augusta is an area bounded by Hicks, Eve, Walton Way and 15th Streets, which is kind of part of the Harrisburg neighborhood now. But West End developed around the end of the 19th century. It was noted that it remained distinctively different from the mills and other parts of Harrisburg, which were actually owned by the mills as mill housing. So this area was actually privately owned homes. But the resident library was founded during a time of increased charitable work among upper class women at the turn of the century. Maybe part of that kind of progressive larger movement that's on a national scale. But this series of photos are taken a little bit later in the library's history in 1953 by Fitzsims again. And these photos are actually taken for the Graniteville Bulletin, which this area of Harrisburg probably housed a good deal of the Graniteville Enterprise Police. But you can see interior and exterior shots of the West End Library. You've got the children reading at the table, as well as observing an aquarium and playing outside. I would hazard to bet that most of these children in this photograph were part of children from families whose parents worked in the mills, either Graniteville or one of the other nearby mills. Cool. There's so much more in our collections. I help tell the story of women in Augusta. But if you have any more questions that I would talk about today or just want to get in touch, there's my contact information and my email there. So feel free to reach out, and thank you for your time. And I'm going and get us back to Galen.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I learned a lot about Augusta's women, especially the Women's Club. That was interesting, how the philanthropic and helpful ways that women decided that they were going to impact Augusta. I appreciate you joining us today, and we do hope that everyone will join us in January when we start back with an era of change. Dr. Cashin said that the 1950s to the 1980s was one of the most, the eras that has one of the most changes that happened in Augusta, and we're going to talk about those. And so we invite everyone. We're hoping to be sort of a hybrid program then. And members, and this is where the advantage of membership comes in. Members will be invited to come to the museum, whereas there are others will be available for streaming and for the video recordings. So everyone have a wonderful, wonderful holiday, and thank you for joining us. And thank you, Natalie, for a very informative presentation today.